Hello, my dear friends. It's Orest from Ukraine. Basically, now I'm in Lviv with my good friend Boris. Hello, Boris. Nice to see you.
All right.
Yeah, for your consideration, Boris is one of those unique people who visited every single country in the world, and we know each other from our beloved club NomadMania, right?
Absolutely. This is our third time to meet.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to see what it was like in real life, and it was pretty different from the image I had before.
Cool. So now you're in Lviv. Like this is your last stop.
Yes.
On this grand Ukrainian journey. Like, can you tell us where have you been before coming to Lviv?
I wouldn't call it a grand tour, but I only had 1 week. Unfortunately, I would have loved to see more. Obviously, some parts are off limits, like Eastern Ukraine. I'm not a war journalist, so that would be a little bit too much. But so I entered Ukraine from Moldova. There's regular transport, like 9-10 buses a day directly from Kisina to Odessa, and it was my first time to visit Odessa. So yeah, I saw those 4 cities, and all 4 of them are completely different. They have a different feel and a different atmosphere.
So can you tell a little bit more, how do those cities differ in your opinion now, and which were your experience in Odessa, in Kharkiv, in Kyiv, in Lviv, and how would you compare them at the moment?
So the different, I'm sure before I had only been to Kyiv and Odessa, and we're talking 2014, so that's just after basically the war started, if you look at it from a grander scheme, like before the full invasion, but of course 2014 was already the start of the war. I visited end of October, and already then of course Kyiv and Lviv were different cities, so they already had a different feel, but I think we should focus maybe on the feel it has as a visitor now, as for security and the situation.
Yeah.
So when I arrived in Odessa, basically for many reasons it could have been 10 years ago, 2 years ago, it could have been any time, because there was very little hints that I was actually in a country at war. So Odessa felt like completely relaxed. There were people in the streets, drinking, celebrating, singing, music, and women, men, couples, families, people walking their dogs, this is no alarm, this is just an ambulance, which you can find anywhere in the world.
Police.
Oh, a police, sorry. There was no hint that I was in a country at war until I came to certain areas in Odessa which are blocked off, so you cannot go there, and it's basically the access from the city. So you need to understand that Odessa is a little bit higher up. Of course, it's on the Black Sea, but to go to the Black Sea coast and to the beaches,
it's on the cliff, kind of.
Yeah, you need to go down, and this is officially you cannot do this. Some locals told me that they still sneak to the beach, which I can understand because it's nice weather and you want to cool off. It's your beach after all, but these beaches are mined, and of course it's a strategic position. Odessa is an important, I think the most important port city in Ukraine. So of course it has a military significance. So at these points, then you can understand, okay, something is different, something is going on here. But other than that, life goes on, and everything seems normal.
Like if the foreigner doesn't read news and he suddenly finds himself in Odessa, there is very little evidence of war.
If you would catapult yourself, the other hint might be that there were some posters with military. Of course, all in Ukrainian, so I use my phone to translate just out of curiosity, and then when you read it you understand, okay, maybe something is wrong here, but other than that, no, it's very relaxed. Yes, lots of flags, so a lot of blue and yellow, painted on houses.
It is?
Yeah, here like this, but I must say that, and I only saw it in Odessa, like you see these stones on the building. In Odessa, at the entrance, many of the stones would have a blue stone and a yellow stone. So they would paint the wall actually, and in addition to having flags as well. So, but even like markers in streets, like where cars couldn't enter, they would be painted blue and yellow. So there was, and there was a lot of.
So it feels like
patriotic or nationalistic
they're like
signs.
even more evidence of patriotism in the eastern cities, which have more threat of the war than here.
Even though Odessa probably
one of the most Russified cities.
Yeah, but also one of the most furthest away from Russia, so they're not really. They have been attacked,
Okay.
but less, of course, than Kyiv or Kharkiv or many other places, or especially, of course,
But you
eastern.
know, the situation in Odessa was not uncertain. It was uncertain for many time because
it is
who
a target.
would know
Of course.
if Mykolaiv and Kherson would let
Exactly.
the army go. But
Yeah.
so they were on the
Plus-
alert. But now we see that Odessa is doing very well.
Plus that Russia might be able to use Transnistria, which is pretty close to Odessa, so they might have used it to squeeze this part of Ukraine, but it never happened.
It's good to hear that things are fine there. Yeah.
I was in Transnistria before entering Ukraine, and I expected, I don't know, tension, signs of Russian presence, but surprisingly I didn't see any when we entered. There was no extra checks or anything, so there was no problem
stuff.
because it was my third visit to Transnistria, and it was just like before. You just enter and people were friendly. There were no signs of anything going on. So I must say that for Odessa, so before going here, I downloaded an app on my phone, so you get notified when there is an air alarm. You can actually filter the regions that you go to. It's pretty advanced, and one day and you get quite a few messages because I filtered all the regions I was going to. So one morning I woke up and I saw that 2 hours before there had been a warning, and actually I read on the news, even in my country there was on the news that in Odessa a factory was hit and one person got killed, unfortunately.
Did you hear at night?
But again, no, I never woke up, I didn't hear anything. It was just when I woke up and I saw this message, then I read the news that
very
something
often
happened,
what they in order not to provide the exact details what happened, not to disclose information to Russians, they tell in Odessa province something happened, and then it could be like 100 kilometers from Odessa anyway.
Yeah.
So let's move to Kharkiv. We are moving from the south all the way to the east, which is quite a journey, right? I would say.
Yes, I found there's I think it's a daily train directly from Odessa to Kharkiv. It's 14 hours by train, and maybe in a way to sponsor Ukrainian railways, I took a first class sleeper.
Okay, right.
It's luxury because you have two beds. The other bed was not occupied.
What was the cost of this?
It was it was just over 2,000 grivna.
Like 50 euro.
Which is about just a little bit over 50 euro.
50 euro for the comfortable overnight
14
train
hours,
ride.
and I slept, almost most, but I was reading and then sleeping, and I just closed the door. It was perfect. And when I arrived in Kharkiv, I was completely fresh, and
nice.
And I went out.
Yeah, Ukrainian trains are pretty comfortable, right, to move around for such a vast territories.
For me, it's by far the best way to travel here. I think, especially now, because I think by road it would maybe you might have
20
checkpoints,
hours
or
checkpoints,
it would just take longer. And and this is more comfortable. Then I wanted to take a subway to travel to the city center because it's you can walk, but it's a little bit far.
Subway is still operating in Kharkiv. There are like 3 fast, rapid lines to connect.
And I was about to pay the ticket for the subway in one of these machines, and then this supervisor said, he made a sign like, well, no, and then I saw that all the gates are just open. So probably because they're used also as a bomb shelter. Subways in Kharkiv are just free. You can use them. So I immediately noticed a big difference. Of course, well, you probably know Kharkiv is, first of all, it's pretty close to the border with Russia. And secondly, it was heavily attacked from the early stages of the invasion.
Yeah, like last year I was at Kharkiv twice, and I was at the time there when the Russian army were standing on the outskirts of the city. So it was like a frontline town, I would say. Yeah.
In a way liberated, in the way that the area around Kharkiv was also freed of Russians. So there are still attacks now, but much less than a year ago. But I noticed on my alarm app that in this week I'm here, Kharkiv has by far the most warnings for air alerts, way more than Kyiv and certainly more than Lviv and Odessa. And anyway, since it was badly, since it was really involved in the front line, as you say, you will see damage in Kharkiv. I mean,
like physically, by walking on the streets, you see destroyed buildings.
So I went to probably. Well, I remember, maybe whoever is watching will remember as well. There was I think the first week already of the invasion. A Russian missile did a direct hit on this big administrative building,
governor's office.
Freedom Square, which was completely destroyed. Well, the building is still there. All the windows were, of course, destroyed. Also, the surrounding buildings. So
you walked around the neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
it's pretty badly damaged.
It's. I heard that people from Kharkiv say that this is the second biggest square in the world. I later read that maybe not the second, but it's a very big square, and you need to know that this building is on the east side of the square, so it's very visible, and it's also there's a huge crane, so it looks like they might be reconstructing, rebuilding, repairing it. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's something is already underway. That attack, I think 29 people died, and a lot more got injured because it was. I think it was during a working day, and
it was like an administration office.
This is basically a downtown big office
and
area,
you would not imagine that somebody would shoot a rocket into the administrative building.
But anyway, so the big difference with Odessa is that in Kharkiv you can see like big banners saying, people from Kharkiv, city of Kharkiv, we are heroes, and we will rebuild the city, and so you really feel much more like. Which is very understandable because people lived under siege for a while, and the situation is better now. But it was much more affected, of course, in Odessa. So after walking around the central area, I took a subway to the last stop at I don't remember which line it was, but towards
like northeast.
Northeast Saltivka. I think it's
Saltivka
neighborhood, and I'm not sure if the station is also called Saltivka. But anyway, from there, I took a bus, which apparently also happened to be free, because I had read that the northern part of Saltivka was badly attacked, badly hit, which I wanted to see for myself, and this was a very, pretty shocking experience in the sense that. You must understand, whoever has been to Eastern Europe, you probably know that there's these neighborhoods which are all these like 1950s, 60s big apartment blocks, and Saltivka is like that, and every single apartment I didn't see one apartment block which was not damaged, and some were completely destroyed, some were badly damaged, some were maybe you could see that there had been fires. But there was not one which was untouched. And also, this is you told me just before that this is one of the most populated areas in Kharkiv.
One of the biggest city neighborhoods in all of Ukraine.
400,000 people living there. So it's basically, you could call it a city within a city. And out of these people, you cannot live there. You almost cannot live there now. So I walked around probably 2 hours, and in 2 hours I met less than 20 people.
Wow.
Which is, and that's why I'm saying it's shocking, because you see these big buildings where probably thousands of people can live in one of those buildings. You can see playgrounds for kids, and miraculously they were unharmed. So they were all with colors, and the contrast. Well, I took a lot of pictures there. The contrast with these playgrounds, and then just 50 meters behind it, like a huge building which was completely destroyed. That's really.
I was in Saltivka as well. Last summer we took some humanitarian aid to give to people there, and there I think because we were with a bigger group of people, we hanged out on one of the mostly visible squares when Russians were not far away still. And probably they spotted us, so once we started handing over food to people, we felt like the artillery fire coming closer and closer to us. So then we just had to wrap up and leave, but that was pretty shocking, and I really feel what you are telling. So
The other thing I wanted to say about safety in Kharkiv
Yeah.
is when I was walking around the Freedom Square area, which is basically downtown Kharkiv, I had several air alerts in a row, and actually not just on my phone but also in the streets. So I could, and it was almost simultaneous when the message arrived on my phone. At the same moment I heard the sirens going off. And the flashing lights, and in Kharkiv, other than in Odessa, you don't see them, but in Kharkiv, there are visible shelters around the city, marked as shelter. Apart from, of course, the subway stations, which are also used as shelters. I still saw tents in the subway stations, and
people
and
leave
almost
it just in case.
and almost every subway station had a special room for children to play in, sponsored by UNICEF. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. But anyway, so then these alarms went off. I was in this big open space, so you're kind of vulnerable, so then I was like, maybe I'm completely stupid, but I was like, I want to see what people do here, and everyone was like completely ignoring the sirens, just driving their cars, walking the kids and everything, and I was like, well, why would I go run for a shelter if no
This
one
is not a travel advice, guys,
no,
by any chance?
No. And I can imagine, because later I was talking to people like, well, you don't even run for it. And they said, yeah, the first time, of course, when the war started, we did. We were scared and we were always hiding. But then we learned that mostly these attacks get averted, and especially now in these last weeks, it has been proven because there were a lot of attacks. There were a lot of missiles from Russia going into Ukraine, but almost all of them were captured before they even hit their targets. So that's another reason probably why people think like,
also people adjust, they get too relaxed. But also like in Kharkiv, there were situations when people were waiting just like this for a bus, and then the rocket landed on the bus stop. So
yes.
I mean, there are different approaches to this. Obviously, officially, everybody should go down to the shelter, but in practice, people are already so fed up with this. And also, like, if you think of statistically, like, what's the chance of you being hit by the direct rocket missile in the largest country in Europe by area? Like, there are more troubles, more risk to be in a traffic accident, probably, right?
And plus, I think that what you're talking about, I don't think this happened lately. I mean, this was in the beginning that people were hit in the streets.
And when the artillery was still within the city range.
Exactly. So that's for safety in Kharkiv. So statistically speaking, I had the most alerts. It's close to Russia, so logically speaking, it was the most dangerous place where I went. But honestly speaking, it didn't at all feel like unsafe.
Okay, that's good to know.
Not at all.
And then from Kharkiv, as I understand, you went to Kyiv, to our capital. Like from the east, we moved to the center of the country.
Yes, the center.
Also
north.
train.
Also train, because train. I mean, you can say many bad things about Soviet Union, but trains may be the only good legacy they left behind. And the distances within Ukraine are such that it makes sense to use night trains, because you basically board the train somewhere in the evening and you arrive between 6 and 8 the next morning. So
you save time.
It's
for
perfect. You
sites,
save time and you save
money for accommodation.
Yeah, well, the train is your accommodation. I just had my coming here was my third night train.
Good. So how was Kyiv?
Kyiv, Odessa was my first time, Kharkiv was my first time. So Kyiv was the first city that I could compare to my first visit, which was in 2014, as I said before, and it felt very similar, because I remember one of my memories was, I need to save the flag.
Let's save the flag.
Let's save the flag, which is a good
Here
way
to
take this flag, which I actually took in Kyiv. So this is a good moment to pick it up. It was almost flying away, and that's not good, because we need to take good care of this beautiful flag. One of my memories of Kyiv in 2014 was that there was a big, kind of a makeshift memorial on Independence Square, because the same year there was I don't know if you call it a revolution or uprising, but there was a big revolt against the then leader. A lot of people died.
In 2014, we're talking about the Euromaidan revolution.
Exactly, and this is the square that we're talking about. So, and most of these people were young, I suppose, students. I remember that on one side of the square there was this whole row of photos with names and pictures, and so you can see when they were born, when they were killed. And already back then this left a big impression. This is still there, so you can still see all these pictures, all these names, and it reminds you that the full war started in 2022, but the whole conflict started already much before.
This is very important moment here, because everybody now rediscovered Ukraine starting from the Russian full-scale invasion of February 2022. But guys, you have to remember that the entire war is ongoing since 2014, when Russia actually annexed Crimea and started the war in Donbass. So now we are already almost
9 years.
Nine years into the war. And if you think of the wider scale, this is a part of a century-long aggressive policy of Russia towards Ukraine. And now this war is actually a decisive moment when Ukraine eventually breaks free from the Russian influence and is getting embraced with the Western society where we actually belong. That's how I see in the grand scheme of things of what's happening around.
But anyway, we are diverting from Kyiv.
Kyiv itself, yeah.
So I met Eugene from NomadMania, and he and his wife, they kindly hosted me, showed me around, not just in Kyiv, but they also took me to Borodyanka, Bucha and Irpin. I'm sure readers will recognize those names, because they were Frontline news at the very beginning of the war. A lot of war crimes happened there. They're already documented, which is a good way nowadays. Like Second World War, many things happened that we don't know about, but this war, everything is
transparent now,
fully documented. So. But the difference with Kharkiv is that now these areas are basically safe. And so I'm going back to what I was trying to say. The biggest surprise for me was that the reconstruction is going on at a really amazing speed. So I went to this street in Bucha where last year a Russian convoy of tanks was completely destroyed. Of course, not just the convoy was destroyed, but also the houses and the trees and the whole street. You can easily find the pictures online. We will probably share them as well. So we went to this street, and when you see it now, it's just like a newly built street with new asphalt, new pavement, new houses, new trees, new fences, people already living there. So you must imagine that the war is still going on. And during the war going on, they already managed to rebuild this whole area. People moved back as if nothing ever happened. And for me, this was like, I never expected to see this, because I expected to see like soldiers going to fight and soldiers coming back, and maybe people hiding for air raids and whatever, but and maybe quietly going back to normal life, but fully restoring what has been destroyed so fast is really, I think it's a very good concrete example of how resilient Ukrainians are in getting already, even though the war is still going on, but already going to the future and leaving this behind. So
and what's important is that Ukrainian people decided even their house was destroyed or so, they're we are not moving anywhere, we're just gonna rebuild it and we stay and fuck house. You Russians and so on, we are going to stay here and protect it. So that was also very interesting. And Kyiv is the pumping heart of Ukraine, right? So you can feel the scale of the city with these vast views over the Dnieper River. You definitely feel there a center of East Slavic civilization, right?
And then the weird thing is you drive in 25 minutes, you drive back from these destroyed towns or partly already rebuilt towns. You can still see some of the bridges are still destroyed, some buildings are still destroyed, because you cannot rebuild everything in just a year. But you drive back, you cross the river on like a makeshift bridge, and you enter a different world where basically it looks like nothing ever happened, unless you start looking more closely and you see signs of destruction. Plus you see, like in one of the squares in Kiev, we saw like a small collection of destroyed Russian tanks and armored vehicles. We also saw a huge wall of, starting in 2014, all the soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers who died during the war. So until I'm on the far right side, I saw pictures of guys who really died just a few days before. So this wall is being, let's say, updated in a sense. So and again, this is where you start realizing, when you see a wall from here to, I think even the building, the university building we see behind us. So you imagine this is a wall and it's full of pictures of soldiers who died for defending their country. So this was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I must also add here that the security of Kyiv and the peaceful life as it could look like there only became possible with effective air defense recently. So even during your travel in Ukraine, some of the most impulsive, heaviest attacks have been made on Kyiv during night, with dozens of rockets flying from all different directions. But thanks for Western defensive weapons that you guys and you kindly sent to us, it was possible not only to prevent the destruction, but also save, I would say, hundreds of lives. Like, could you just imagine this being shot into the civilian cities? So we are working all together to make a world a better place, and I'm very grateful to everybody who is somehow participating in this cause. I'm grateful for you that you are coming, because Ukraine stands together with the rest of the world, actually protecting the free spirit of our modern civilization. Yeah, I would like to wrap up with us being here in Lviv, in the westernmost city, in my hometown. I feel very privileged when my guests from all around the world actually come here. So what can you tell about Lviv? Yeah, because just like tonight you're going to come back to your home country.
Unfortunately, I need to leave tonight because there's many things to do at home. But I would have preferred to stay. I'll be back probably already in October.
By the way, in mid-October, together with NomadMania, we are organizing an educational visit to Ukraine, which will take us to Kharkiv, Kyiv and Lviv. The highlight of the entire week-long event is going to be the NomadMania Awards ceremony in Lviv. Boris is going to join us, and you are also welcome. Please follow the link below this video to check out the details of our visit.
Yeah, Lviv is another city I've been to before. It was like a 7-hour something train ride from Kyiv. Again, very comfortable. This time I was actually in second class, but but it's
so 4 people.
You're 4
in the
people, and I had the highest bed, so it was still very comfortable. And Lviv, basically, comparing to the other cities we talked about before, is by far the most relaxed city. Even more than Odessa. Here you really feel like war. What war? The only thing I noticed is that I saw, which kind of surprised me because the war seems very far away from here, but I did see a lot of soldiers here coming in and out of trains and walking with their girlfriends, and these are actually really touching moments for me. You see a guy coming from a train, a girl with a rose waiting for him, and then they kiss and they hug and they walk away. But otherwise, walking around Lviv, this is not enough to judge for yourself, but if we would take the camera around, I walked around the whole, part of the city this morning. I'm gonna walk around more now.
We'll show some of your pictures of
and it is like, it could be Prague, it could be Krakow, it could be any other city in Central Europe, completely safe, shops are open, people are laughing. Here, there's hardly any sign of, you told me there's 1 or 2 buildings damaged, but there's hardly, I didn't see any damage, let's say. And also even in Odessa, sometimes some areas are closed and there are barriers, but here I didn't see any barriers so far.
Well, it's the westernmost city. It's just 1 hour from the European Union border.
So this is probably too far. I want to add that, I mean, based on what I saw and experienced this week, and of course there's no guarantee, so if next week you come here, you might have a different, I cannot guarantee that you'll be safe, but based on what I felt this week, and I'm an experienced traveler, so I'm not completely crazy, let's say, but based on what I saw this week, I would easily stay another 1 or 2 weeks, and I would advise anyone to come here, because also I had my second thoughts before going, like, well, okay, I'm going to a country at war, so what am I going to find? But now I know the answer for me for this week, and the answer is that you can visit, and it's not even just dark tourism where you see only destroyed buildings, but for me, more importantly, is what I saw is that is the mentality, like the really strong mentality of people who are not just holding their flags and fighting for their country, but also building it and having a spirit of unity, like we want to keep the life as we have it now, and we don't want to change it. That's just not going to happen. So I would, and again, based on what I saw, I would advise anyone to come here. Probably your government is going to tell you that you shouldn't, but did you always do what your parents told you? I don't think so. So
exactly. And I would like to add here that this is telling you the person that's been to every country in the world, you know, and you are telling this based on your experience to visit also other like conflict zones, better, worse, well-off countries and so on. And many of those experiences are written in your book, right?
Yes.
Recently, Boris published a book, so you will see it over here. We're gonna link to it. So. What can you say about your book? How does it relate to your travel experience? And we'll leave people with that.
Yes.
To go and order your book.
You should. Actually, I just need to say it. Okay, so my book, the title is The Long Road to Cullaville. Now you will all say, what the hell is Cullaville?
Yeah.
Cullaville is a small town on the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, another conflict zone or ex-conflict zone, but and Ireland was my very last country, so the title refers to my last crossing into a new country. I chose Ireland, which is ridiculously close to my country, because I wanted to celebrate with my friends and family.
Have an easy landing in the end.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, so I decided, because some people tried to write, because a few people who visited every country, they wrote a book about every country, and I don't believe this is possible, because there's almost 200 countries, so the book would be like enormous. So I decided to focus on just a few stories, so it's 16 chapters, basically in 16 different countries, and actually the main topic is the risk of travel. So it's pretty much related to my trip to Ukraine as well. And the conclusion also in my book, and this trip only underlines it, is that risk is a very relative concept. Yeah. Risk doesn't necessarily is not synonymous to danger, and I strongly believe that life without risk, first of all, I don't think it exists, and I also don't think it makes any sense to live a life without risk, because then I always say, you would never dare to ask out that beautiful girl that you see if because it's a risk. She can say no, and so you don't know what she's going to say. So, but if you don't do it, you will never date her. So if you don't take this risk, you will always have a no.
You can learn a lot about the world by actually traveling itself.
And of course, and again, yeah, exact. Thank you, because this is basically brings us back to what I started with. This was my reason to visit Ukraine now. Especially now that the air defense is at a higher level than a year ago. It is relatively safe. It's surely not the safest country in Europe, and probably not even in the world right now, but much safer than a year ago.
And much safer than most people think.
Much safer than you think, and plus, which is important for travelers, like logistically, you can book hotels online, you can book train tickets online, like everything is operating as if nothing happens. So logistically, as a traveler, you can go to a restaurant, you can move around. In Kharkiv, the subway is free. So travel actually is as easy as it has ever been in Ukraine.
Cool. So guys, thank you for watching this. Please order the book of Boris. This video was intentioned to tell you about the travel on Ukraine, but such book also can supplement your experiences and so on. So
I just want to add one thing. I very much loved writing my first book. I'm writing a second book.
So you'll include your trip.
And I can already promise you in my second book, one chapter will be on Ukraine, because it will be about both my visits in 2014 and 2023.
Deal. Thank you for coming. And
thanks for having me.
See you soon.
Sure.